Hey folks, Troy Dooley, the Beachside CEO, and we are back at Maple Street Biscuit Company here in Miramar Beach, Florida, down on the Emerald Coast. And I tell you what, this company, what they stand for, their team members, second to none. Matter of fact, I noticed on Instagram yesterday that today they are celebrating first responders of all types in memory of 9/11. And I'm gonna do the disclaimer, and then we're gonna get into today's show. And I'm excited about today's show for several reasons. One, we're gonna talk about 9/11, maybe a little bit different facet than some will, but we're gonna be doing that. We're gonna be talking about the epidemic of sex trafficking here in America. Totally different show today than what you're used to. But I do think we're gonna finish up excuse me, with something you're gonna enjoy on how to be a better leader personally. And we'll tie all this stuff together. The opinions and views of myself or anyone we have on the show is not necessarily those of Maple Street, those of any of our other hosts, or not hosts, but any of our other supporters and sponsors that we have. So I do need to make that clear. But today is the 18th year. I put up on Facebook last night the fact that people went to bed, moms, dads, boyfriends, girlfriends, newlyweds. They went to bed on the 10th, totally anticipating getting up and having a wonderful day, getting up and having another day in their life to live. And as we all know now, that isn't what happened. Their life ended. 200, matter of fact, I don't want to be like some people and exaggerate the numbers. I want to talk about these numbers because I think they're important. All we ever seem to talk about is the towers. But we had 2,996 that were murdered that day on the towers. We also lost additional members over at the Pentagon. We lost 343 over there, and we lost 72 in the airlines. This is something that is, as we go backwards and look at, there's a whole new generation that this is just a history lesson for. They didn't live through that time. And I'd ask you guys, where were you at when this happened? I was sitting in my office at ProStep at the time when I got the call on the phone, hey, you need to come down and watch the TV. And we all went downstairs and watched as the second plane went into the tower. And it was at that moment that one of the people there said, Troy, can you just pray for everyone? They know my faith, they know where I'm coming from. And I didn't pray at that time for the people just at the towers. I prayed for all of us that were there. We closed the office and we took it away. But it came a very strong message at that time that the people in New York rallied together. First responders who had their day off, first responders that weren't even part of New York, came into town to help. And while some people were having to jump to their death, while other people were trying to figure out if they could get down the stairwells, you had first responders that literally were going up. They were doing what they were trained to do. They were doing what they do every day. And they gave their life for those that were still in the building. And the interesting thing is, as I started looking at some of the news reports coming out of New York, is how many second generation now kids that were just at home with their mom have now become first responders because of what their dad or their mom was doing that day. This is something that is in people's DNA. When you're a first responder, whether you're an officer, whether you're a fireman, whether you're a paramedic, it doesn't matter what it is. When you're a first responder, this is a purpose. This is a calling that you have in your life. And that's what a lot of the unsung heroes, if you will, of this tragedy that happened, this mass murder, they were the ones that we need to be thinking of today. Matter of fact, if we were to add up some of the people that have died after 9/11 from respiratory issues and stuff like that, these numbers would be higher. But I want to read something that came, because I think this is important in everything that we're doing. It says September 11th attacks were a series of 4 coordinated terrorist attacks by an Islamic terrorist group, Al-Qaeda. It was against the United States on the morning of Tuesday, September 11, 2001. These attacks killed 296 people, injured over 6,000 others, and caused over $10 billion in infrastructure and property damage. Additional people died in 9/11 related to cancer and respiratory disease in the months and years that followed. 4 passenger airliners operated by 2 major U.S. carriers, United Airlines and American Airlines, all of which departed from airports in northeastern United States bound from San Francisco, LA, were hijacked by 19 Al-Qaeda. Now before I read on, this changed everything that we do in America today. Before that day, we didn't have near the security at the airports. We didn't have near the security at government buildings. We were just, to some degree as a nation, we thought we were exempt from everything that we had seen in the newspapers, everything that we had seen elsewhere. We were the greatest superpower on earth. We were very protected. Nobody could do this, and yet they did. And I'm gonna tie this in, but this is important today as we look back in history. So 2 of the airlines, American Airlines 11 and United Airline 175, were crashed into the North and South Towers, respectively, what we know as the World Trade Center. It was a complex in Lower Manhattan. Within an hour and 42 minutes, both 110-story buildings collapsed. Debris and the resulting fires caused a partial or complete collapse of other buildings in the World Trade Center complex, including the 47-story building, what we know as, number 7 of the World Trade Center. A third airplane, Flight 77, was crashed into the Pentagon headquarters, and Flight 93, Let's Roll, was initially flown towards Washington, D.C., but was crashed at Stony Brook Township. We lost a lot of lives that day. And something that a friend of mine on Facebook and I always debate is the following, and it's Corey Augustine over at MLM Resources, and he'll say to me, Troy, so much has been done in God's name. Corey doesn't believe in God. He's self-proclaimed atheist. And as I sat back and I look at what Corey is thinking, as he looks at the world, and he's an expat with this beautiful family over in the Philippines. He looks at this, and I look at this, and I say, wow, man, this is a pretty crazy time, because you've got Islamic terrorists that proclaim a holy war against the United States, and they kill people. You have extremists that were Christians that kill people. You have extremists all over in the name of God that do things. And as I looked at this, I thought to myself, it's easy to blame God for everything and deny the evil that's in the world. If you have good, then you have evil. Otherwise, you wouldn't have good and evil. You wouldn't have a name for it, if you will. And as I looked at this, I thought, America came together after that. It came together in a way that American Muslims denounced the extreme terrorist, American Christians, American anything. We came together as a country that day because we realized that we had been attacked. Since then, we have fought a war for 18 years in Afghanistan. We're fighting it in a different manner because it is a holy war. It's a holy war not just against the United States, but other countries out there that believe in the way we do. Now, I believe we have it on our own shores at times, and it's the ideology behind the fighting. And it's not just the Islamic terrorists. It's just the fact that we have forgotten what made this country great. And it was the fact that we all came together from different ethnic groups, different backgrounds, men, women, white, black, didn't matter. We were who we were, and we said we wanted to create something where people would be free. We haven't been perfect that whole time doing it. We're not perfect today. We bitter back and forth and get our knickers all in an uproar over gun rights, over who should be what gender, all that crap. And we seem to continually lose focus on what's most important, and that is the human beings themselves. We put the agendas, we put the topics above the actual people. And I think today, maybe this is a day where we can start talking to our children who were not born then. You know, I'm looking at a 16-year-old, two 11-year-olds, a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old that are in my household that weren't born. To them, this is just an historic event. They are one generation away from the actual event that happened. I now know how people must have felt about the Civil War, about World War I, World War II, about Vietnam. All these wars we've gone through, Pearl Harbor, oh my gosh. When you look at the stuff that we've gone through, once it's removed, people tend to forget what happened. And as I sat here today, those emotions came flowing back. Matter of fact, I woke up because of the dogs at about 2:30. And as I walked outside and was just looking at the moon, it all came flooding back of the fact that, man, there were people that were getting up early and going to work that never made it home. A phone call that didn't make it in. A phone call that went dead in a second like that. People who made the conscious choice to jump out of windows versus being burned alive. And yet we tend to forget. And that just infuriates me to some degree, but in other degrees, you know, I want to make sure that we don't forget. I want to make sure that every year we're celebrating the lives of those that were lost. And at the same time, we're remembering and being vigilant in the fact that this is a war of good and evil. It's not about a war about ideologies. This goes way beyond that. When Corey and I talk, I don't try to change his mind and say, oh my gosh, you have to believe in God or you're going to hell. And he doesn't try to change my mind and say, Troy, you're stupid for believing in a God. What we've come to realize is that there really is good and evil in this world. And if we keep turning a blind eye to the evil, and we live in this utopia that just peace and love can make changes, then what we're going to see is something that I'm going to talk about next. We're going to continue to see a rise in some of the evil, not just in America, but across the globe. You know, when we look at the stuff that we don't talk about a lot, that just seems to be kind of breezed over by people or the media or whatever, it's stuff like the opiate addiction, suicides, you know, crazy stuff that is important, but nobody talks about it. The deaths from DUIs that are out there. And to a certain degree, people will say, well, Troy, that's people's free will. So were the terrorists. They all thought they were going to go to heaven and get a bunch of virgins. Kind of a weird ideology when you think about it. But they were doing this because it's instilled in them. It's indoctrinated in their soul. And we have stuff that we've missed because we're not looking. We're so wrapped up in our own personal agendas that we don't even know if our neighbors happen to be sex traffickers, if our neighbors happen to be pedophiles playing around and paying for children. Now, you may say, now, wait a minute, Troy, you just shifted gears. I did. I sat in a meeting 4 years ago and listened as the Attorney General of Utah started talking about what his true passion was. And here we are in the middle of a direct sales event, and he's talking about taking down evil, taking down the bad guys in Salt Lake City who happen to do this. And as I was preparing for this and just focusing in on what did I want to talk about, I ran across an organization that I just in passing had seen, and I started doing some due diligence, and it's Phantom Rescue. A lot of you may have seen the movie Taken. The founder of this nonprofit was the actual one of the consultants on that show. But they brought in some staggering stats that I want to use right now, because when we're out here on Facebook talking about gun control, gun rights, all that stuff, when we're out here talking about the opiate addiction, when we're talking about vaping, when we're talking about abortion, any of these controversial subjects, when we're talking about whether people should be able to decide what gender they want to be, whether they cut things off or add things on or whatever they want to do, when we get into so much crap about that, we start missing some very vital, important stuff, and that is the mental psyches of the evil that goes on around us. Listen to these stats right here. This is just in basically the United States, but here you go. 46 children go missing every day in the United States. That's 17,000 children who are snatched for one reason or another from their homes. Sometimes it's a runaway. However, listen to this. On average, the victims are between 11 and 14 years old. The majority of runaways are not 11 to 14. But in a blink of an eye, they're gone. Same way the 3,000 people were snatched from us due to the evil ideology at the time. It's the same type of evil ideology that snatches a child. It's also greed. It's a I guess for a lack of a better term, but one that some that are watching this might be used to. It's like a side hustle or a gig economy. And I know, well, think about this. A lot of the hype that we see on the internet is about all these home-based businesses where you can make a couple $100,000 a year. Listen to this stat. After being trafficked, a child will live to be about for another 3 to 7 years. If you're 11 to 14 years old and you're only going to live 3 to 7 years after you've been snatched from your family, that sucks. But listen to this. The average child that is taken, once they've gone through all of the process, and there's a process, there's an investment that the kidnapper, the sex trafficker puts into these children. They've got to feed them their drugs. They've got to work with their minds. But here's why they do that. The average child will earn them $250,000 a year. Not bad for a side hustle, huh? Or, because you don't find them in the retail outlets. You don't find them, advertising on well-known websites. And yet we want to bicker and dicker around on all these topics that, are they really that important when you actually see the breathing children? And don't get me wrong, gun rights, gun control, abortion rights, the pro-life, all very important stuff. I'm not negating any of that. What I'm saying is evil no matter how you look at it. It's the same evil mindset. It's just sometimes we like to sugarcoat it. It's okay for us to watch a little bit of titty over here, a little bit of woo-woo over here, but nobody ever gives thought about what are the drugs that are being fed to them. Were those really actually men and women who wanted to play that role? Or is it one of these that we're talking about here? 1 of 3 children are solicited for sex within 48 hours of running away from home or becoming homeless in the United States. This is a whole shift here again, but think about this for a minute. The homeless population in the United States. And yet we want to worry about illegal immigration. Do you know in Orange County, California, one of the most prestigious and richest counties in America today, that there's an estimated 400,000 teenagers that are on the streets? Do you realize that in America, when you turn 18 and you're in the foster system, they literally kick you out? No job, no halfway house, no second chance. You're just out on the streets. Worse than that, let's talk about the transgender, the transvestite. I don't know what they call them. I'm not trying to be politically correct. I'm trying to make a point. The teenagers that are so freaking confused that they don't know what they are. If they haven't committed suicide, when they get out on the streets, they're abused in a sex trafficking way, usually by straight men and women. This is an interesting deal that we're looking at here in this show, because this show, oh gosh, Troy, I thought this was going to be a business show. Here's what it is. It's reality in the purest sense. We're fighting evil no matter what you want to call it, no matter how you want to sugarcoat it, no matter how you want to deny it. This is freaking evil. Listen to this here. Over 2 million children are exploited every year globally. Phantom Rescue has deployed in 140 countries. I challenge you to just go get the movie. You can watch it on Netflix, Apple, you can go watch the movie with Liam Neeson, Taken, and see exactly what happens in a world that you're not even familiar with. The majority of people on here probably are not in the sex trafficking trade. You probably don't want to have sex with a child. But if we're in the middle of the United States in Salt Lake City, and the Attorney General in the state of Utah, which one is the most conservative states in the nation, number one priority is fighting child sex crime, trafficking in gated communities in his city. Think about that. When one of America's billionaires hangs himself purportedly in a prison due to decades of being in the sex trade business, purportedly, then you got to give some thought to the evil, not just in 9/11, but the evil that's at your doorstep every day. Listen to this. The trafficking of children is for 3 reasons: sex, harvesting of organs, and labor. These are some tough stats we're talking about today as we remember 9/11, as we go through looking at how can we better ourselves? What can we do to be better? In order for us to do this, we have to wake up and realize that for every good deed that's going on out there, for everything that you want to accomplish, there is somebody that's going through a hell on earth. It could be a parent, it could be a sibling, it could be a child. If you want to be in business today, if you want to be able to do something today, if you want to be able to say, look, I want to change my life today, then you need to be in business for more than just a dollar, more than just building your business. What you have to do is you've got to be in business for what we call a double bottom line. You've got to be in business for something bigger than yourself. You've got to join a mission of some type out there, something that you want to help eradicate. Phantom Rescue wants to eradicate the child sex trafficking industry. And I'll tell you what, if you think you're exempt from it, every major interstate highway that converges east or west, south or north, Atlanta, Chicago, Kansas City, LA, doesn't matter where it's at, there's huge issues there. I live in one of the most prestigious areas in the United States. It's a beautiful barrier island. Some of the well-known people, Governor Huckabee lives here. Bon Jovi's got a place down here. Taylor Swift comes down. Tim McGraw and Faith Hill. Chancey, the author. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And yet just a few years ago, CNBC did an 8-hour documentary on the sex trafficking that goes on the Emerald Coast of Florida. Panama City alone has cracked down and shut down different types of websites like, I don't even know what they call them, where you can go and hire and get this stuff. This is huge. And it's up to you and I to say, look, if we're going to be in business for ourselves, then we've got to make a change. One of the things we've got to do is better ourselves. We can no longer just go out there and call ourselves a leader because you happen to have a profitable business, you rank up in somebody's compensation plan, you're the number one sales person out there. You truly need to become a leader. And the only way to do that is to look inside yourself and make some changes. So as we close out the show today, in order to give you something that you actually can think about besides just the crap that's going on, I want you to think about this. You can write this down, you can just come back and listen to this. But you need to focus on what I'm going to call self-leadership. In other words, you've got to take responsibility. You can no longer be blaming the President of the United States. You can't blame your boss. You can't blame your wife or your or your upline or your downline. You can't blame the company. Whoever you're blaming, stop. Get up, look in the bathroom, take a selfie, because everybody likes to do the selfie thing, and then look at that person, because that's the only person you can blame on why your life is the way it is today. If you're watching this and you're focused, here's some things you need to focus on. No one else should care more about your leadership than you. No one should care about you growing more than you personally. That's just the name of the game. You have to care, because if you don't care, nobody else is going to care. The second thing you've got to look at, you can't afford to wait on others to guide you somewhere. It isn't going to happen that way. You've got to get up. You've got to start making the plan. You've got to focus on what you want. It isn't going to work all the time. Any pioneer that went out there and tried to do something had to cut through the weeds. They had to mow down the doggone trees. They had to do all this crap. But they didn't rely on somebody else guiding them. They went out and did it. So if you're going to be a leader, not a follower, then you've got to go out there and start becoming better. You have to make this decision. Third thing, you're not owed leadership by anybody. Every time somebody comes to me and says, Troy, I need a good upline. No, you just need to be the kind of upline you want. When somebody comes to me and says, Troy, I need a good mentor. How do you know you need a mentor? What is it you need mentored towards or away from? You aren't owed leadership. You need to be your leadership. You need to focus on what it takes for you to grow. When you take those first steps, there's an old adage, I'll get it wrong, but when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So if you're looking for a mentor, you're probably not ready for a mentor. Take control of your leadership, because you're not owed it by anybody else. Fourth thing, you're the only responsible person for your leadership development. Once you have mentors, once you start, you're the only one you can't blame somebody. I didn't grow. I went to Doug Fireball, and I did everything he told me to do, and nothing happened. You can't blame Doug for that. Well, I went to an Eric Worre event, and everybody else was excited, and I tried all that crap, and it didn't work. I went to Grant Cardone because he said if I did 10 times something, it would work. I went to Gary Vee, and I learned to cuss like him, and I'm not growing my business at all. No, you and you alone are responsible for that leadership. Just like we, the people, are the only ones responsible for making change in our communities. We're the only ones that are here to protect. You can't put first responders like police and say, okay, you need to protect my children from sex predators. You can't blame a teacher because you're not doing anything. I don't know why my kids didn't grow. I sent them to school. No, you and you alone. So I'm serious. Take a picture of yourself, and you need to start looking at that every day to decide. Here's some things that you can do. Number one, look at your character. Who are you in private? Are you the same person in private as you are in public? This is important. Look at your character and decide what you need to do. Focus on your spiritual and your emotional side. You know, a lot of people just, they blow that off. They think it's all about tactics. It's all about strategies. No, it's about what's inside of you. Because if your mind and your heart's not right, nothing else is going to get right. You need to get that focused. Number two is on discipline. Stop procrastinating, get it done. I got up early. I get up early every day, but I was really up early today, and I got work done. Don't just sit around and chill out and say, oh, well, it's going to come to me. Matter of fact, one of the things that just drives me nuts to no end is this concept of if you just think it, it'll happen. Oh, if I just think positive thoughts, it's going to happen. The karma or the universe or all this stuff. No, that doesn't even work that way. Okay, you need to start thinking it, but you need to get off your dadgum butt and go do something. If you're just going to sit around lollygagging, hoping something's going to show up, you may be more mixed up than I am, and I'm pretty mixed up. You need to go do something to make a change, doggone it. You got to take action today. Third thing is self-awareness. Recognize what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and don't focus on your freaking weaknesses. If you're strong at something, go become stronger at it. Practice until you can't get it wrong. Okay, don't practice till you get it right. Practice till you can't get it wrong, period. That's what makes you what you need to be. Go out there and start to seek some wise counsel. Start with some good books. I don't have time to read. Well, then go open up an Audible account. Start listening in your car. Matter of fact, Todd Falcone and I go way, 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 way back. And I remember one of his number one leaders in the history of his sales business, a man named Mark Weiser, who to this day is a good friend of ours. When Mark started his business, he had a 3-hour drive in California. And he could sit around and listen to the radio and traffic and all that. Instead, him and Todd would get on phone call and they'd start making phone calls to people. And he built a business that has allowed his network to just increase to no end. And it's because he took action. He decided what he wanted to do. He took control. You have to take control. Lastly, always be evaluating yourself. You need to be journaling constantly. You can get the one-day app, put it on your phone. You can paper journal. I don't care how you do it. But this is all up to you. This has been a long show today. It's been a little bit of a different type of show today on purpose, because I wanted us to remember that it's not just a history lesson when it comes to 9/11. It's real life. It's not about just some utopia of let's get up here and think positive thoughts, let's love each other, let's compromise. There's times when it has to do with good and evil that there is no compromise. When sex trafficking is one of the highest and most profitable side hustles in the gig economy, it shows us the underbelly of some home-based businesses that you may not even have thought of. It's kind of like leadership. We only want to think about the positive leadership. We never think about those that have become great leaders who ripped the world apart. So today, y'all need to look at that. Look at your leadership. Look at what you're doing and focus in on your community and take care of that. Stay humble, stay strong, and you've been listening to the voice of Main Street America.